fear through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, danced a jig over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son, still happy life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to PTBNL, the podcast to be named later, your very new Philadelphia Phillies podcast. We are replacing the In Cap We Trust podcast over at the AMYP network. I am your host for tonight, Shane, and I am joined by first-time podcaster Joseph Berardi. We only have one Joe on the call now. Joey Joseph, how are you, sir?
I'm doing very good, Shane. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to have you on. We are a team of 7 for everyone who's listening to this pilot right now. We are a team of 7. We are only 2 tonight just to get this thing rolling. A couple guys are on the West Coast. A couple guys are in Canada. We're all over the country right now. So Phillies fans from everywhere. But for tonight, you got me and you got Joey Joseph, which is now how I'm just going to refer to you. That'll make this easier.
Sounds perfect.
So why don't you give everyone your Twitter plug and then wherever you write or in whatever you do for a living right now, just so people can get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, so my Twitter handle is @BrosifBiscuit. Both B's and Brosif and Biscuit are capitalized. And right now I work as an admissions counselor at Alvernia University.
Awesome. And do you do any type of writing anywhere outside of for us?
No, pretty much just for you guys. I
Awesome.
do a little satire writing in my free time, but that's pretty much just for me.
I do dig that. At some point, you will have to share some of those things with, if not with everyone, but certainly with the team. We'll all get a bit of a kick on that. But if you guys recognize my voice, it's because I'm on just about every single podcast that comes out of AMYP and a bunch that don't anymore. You can find me on Twitter. It's @Shane_Mead. You can also find me on any of the shows that I now represent, which is TJ Is One of Us, which is our show hosted by Scott, our LA connection, and joined by Andrew Santangelo, both members of this new Phillies podcast as well. Andrew is @AJ_Santangelo. You can also find me on Whiskey Ramble, which is @Whiskey Ramble PC, not because we are PC, but because podcast didn't fit on the Twitter line. That is with our drunken leader, Steve, who is still our best ranked host through AMYP. He will occasionally come on the show. He will not be a full-time member, but he will be there for some of it. We also have Joseph Borick, who would have been on the call tonight had technology not failed him. He is @JJBorick26. He, along with Andrew, hosts the True Philadelphians podcast. So if you recognize them from any of the Facebook groups, they are all over the place. They do a really nice job of marketing over there. Both of them are very, very smart and very funny. So we look forward to having them both on. And then we do have the Disciples of Ed host, Rob. He is @FlyersRob. Or what the hell is he at? That's his old at. Let me pull it up for you so I don't screw this up. He hosts our Disciples of Ed show, which is just @Disciples of Ed. He is @Radio_Rob is how you can find him. That is all the members of our team right now. Sean New, that's right. Sean New 27, I believe his is. He is not on for this show, but he will be on midweek with Joseph Borick, I believe. Now that we got all that kind of stuff out of the way, we are nearing very, very close to the official start of spring training, which is the best time of the year.
I need oxygen.
We all do, man. I was that guy. Super Bowl ended, and Whiskey Rambles Steve is a huge Chiefs fan, and because I am on that show with him, am like a secondary Chiefs fan behind the Eagles fan, and like I was super pumped for the Super Bowl, but the second those clocks hit 0, all baseball. I was sitting there as that game was nearing and just getting the itch. So I am incredibly excited that baseball season is around the corner. Spring training is one of my favorite times of the year because it's when you get to talk about a bunch of people who will undoubtedly never make this roster this year, but it's fun to talk about them anyway. This year we have a new leader bringing these men in. which is different from our previous namesake in Gabe Kapler, whom I still love and still would have loved here in Philadelphia. But such is the Philadelphia Phillies' decisions in life. We are now replaced with a phenomenal manager, phenomenal baseball mind in Joe Girardi. What was your initial reaction when you got the news that they actually did something correct in this front office?
Once the news broke, I was very excited, but when the rumors started happening, I kind of had mixed feelings. I really like Dusty Baker. I thought he was going to end up with the job. I think he got kind of the bad end of the stick with the Nationals, but things really seem to work out for him now, getting to manage the Houston Astros after the firing of AJ Hinch. But once the hype around Girardi started to really build up, and it seemed pretty imminent that they were going to hire him, I was excited. I think he's the right man for the job.
So do I. So all throughout last season, I was very against the Girardi thing, and I was against it because he was so different in his approach while also having the same kind of overall philosophy as Gabe Kapler. I always felt like it was weird for the people who wanted to get rid of an analytically driven mind and replace them with another when their main argument was they didn't like analytics.
Right.
So I always found it to be incredibly weird. I do believe that Girardi does have a significantly better blend of both that quote unquote kind of old school baseball, that natural feel of the game, and the information side that comes with analytics. And then beyond that, he has this kind of cachet that he can walk into a room and people understand this is Joe Girardi. This is not, just career 24th, 25th guy on the roster, Gabe Kapler. There was a difference there. There's something that comes with Joe Girardi that didn't come with Gabe Kapler. So I am excited, especially for a lot of our young guys. I know for a lot of them coming in, they transitioned from that Pete Mackanin time, who was honestly, he was really good for what he was, but he wasn't a major league manager. Then you get Gabe Kapler, whom again, I still very much so believe in. He's in a really tough place right now in San Francisco.
Yeah.
But I think that in order to kind of be the precursor of the information age here in Philadelphia, I do think that Gabe's time here will still be something that is never viewed by anyone else as positive, but I think that it gets the ball rolling in the acceptance of information by fans and the acceptance of information by players. And if we're going to succeed in this new wave and new age of baseball, I think that's incredibly, incredibly important. What is your kind of overall feel and philosophy on information in the game of baseball and how it's changed?
Well, yeah, so from my understanding, before Gabe Kapler, the organization didn't seem to too heavily rely on analytics, from my understanding.
They did not.
So I think he really was the one to usher in that new era for the front office and the organization. And I think that's important. I think the biggest thing with Kapler was, as mentioned, he didn't really have that blend between the human element or the human feel for the game. And he got lost in all of the data. I can recall that snafu where he and the organization were giving out like different scouting reports, and that whole miscommunication issue, especially for a guy who prided himself on communication. But I think he's going to do what he was supposed to do in just 2 short years here, and that's go through all of his growing pains in San Francisco. And hopefully, by the end of his tenure there, he could land himself a better position with a better organization if things break well for him in San Francisco.
I truly hope that it does. It's an incredibly difficult division, difficult to play out there. And he's not really starting with he's starting with less over there than what he started with the Philadelphia Phillies, which is,
that's for sure.
It's really tough. So I feel for him. I do genuinely hope that he's able to make that team competitive in its first year, just the way that he did and exceeded expectations here in Philadelphia in his first year.
Yeah.
He definitely, he's a good guy. He's a smart guy. He deserves to be within an organization that is competitive through September. I don't know that that's going to be San Francisco during his tenure there, but I'm excited for him to have gotten the opportunity. Moving on from the Gabe Kapler aspect, I promise we will limit my Gabe Kapler infatuation as much as we can here on the new PTBNL pod. Let's go into some of the new and the incoming players. I'll be the first to admit the Zach Wheeler thing, when it was like, when you had names like World Series MVP Steven Strasburg, when you had a name like Garrett Cole out there, and you had the deep pockets that the Philadelphia Phillies have, like I wanted no part of what I still believe to be is a project in Zach Wheeler.
Mm-hmm.
And the Phillies go out and they get Zach Wheeler, and it kind of sets the market, which the Phillies have always notoriously done, is pay early. And they're really looking smart right now from a financial standpoint.
Right.
The money that we're giving Zach Wheeler makes me excited for Zach Wheeler. Had we waited 2 weeks for a younger pitcher, or younger than Strasburg and Cole, we could have been paying him an extra $5 to $8 million a year. What's kind of your takeaway and your expectations for this? Let's not go for the full contract, but let's go for this first year here in Philadelphia for Zach Wheeler.
Well, like you mentioned, it's kind of, when you have names like Garrett Cole and Steven Strasburg, it's kind of an underwhelming move. But as you also mentioned, for the price you got him for, you can't really beat that, considering what Cole and Strasburg ended up getting. But I think from what I've seen or what I know about Zach Wheeler, he'll follow the formula he's kind of followed throughout 2018 and 2019. I think he'll be a second half pitcher. I think the first half might not be as exciting as some may like. I think the numbers won't be exactly where anyone really wants them to be, but I think he'll really break in and settle into the organization in that second half, like he's done with the Mets in 18 and 19, and hopefully that'll carry us to a postseason. So I think, ERA-wise, it'll be somewhere like a 3.6, 3.5 maybe. Maybe get somewhere to 200 innings pitched, and I think that'll be good enough.
Yeah, so I agree. And one of the biggest things is we have collapsed, obviously. We all know here in Philadelphia that our August and Septembers over the last 2 seasons have been incredibly underwhelming. They took a very fun and overachieving team in 18 and crashed and burned hard, and then a team that was never really hitting its stride in full expectation. Obviously, a myriad of injuries and different circumstances last year made this team almost unwatchable. Having a legitimate arm beyond Aaron Nola out there to know that 2 out of every 5 days you can go in with a pretty good feeling is a luxury that we did not have. And that's huge. And if he's going to be that in August and September for us, that's going to be huge. So I do agree with that. Let's talk a little bit about the rest of this rotation and how it kind of shakes out. So we know the 1-2 we know the 1-2 is going to be Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler. We know that because of Jake's contract, he's going to be in there, and Jake's saying all the things that everyone who's ever played a major league sport or professional sport is going to say, that he's healthy for the first time in years, and he feels like this is his comeback kind of a season. Well, we've heard that twice now. It has not shaken out. But he will inevitably be in there at some point or in some position, probably the 4 or 5. Then you have Eflin, you have Pivetta, you have Velasquez, and then you have the intriguing Spencer Howard. So let's save Spencer Howard for last, because that's the one I'm most excited about talking about. Given those other names, is there anyone that you wholeheartedly believe can be a 3 or 4 starter in, let's throw out just the Phillies, but anywhere in baseball?
You mean for those pitchers on different teams, or
no. Sorry, with our 3, kind of rotation starters at this point, with Eflin, Pivetta, and Velasquez and Arrieta, or 4 of them. Are you confident in any of them that they will be a consistent 3 or 4?
I'm gonna say no. I like to hope Nick Pivetta maybe takes a step forward. Obviously, there's a little hype surrounding him because of the video of him training with, I believe, Noah Syndergaard, I think.
Yes.
And everyone's saying he's, has a new windup. His really, everything mechanics-wise looks a little different. I don't pay too close of attention to any of that stuff, but I know there's a little hype surrounding him. I think for what Zach Eflin did last season, obviously he kind of lost his way in the middle of the season, but he came back strong. I think that's good enough for him being a number 4 and number 5 starter. I don't think he projects as anything more, so I think that's fine for what he ended up giving in terms of production last season. Jake Arrieta, like you mentioned, the narrative with him is just not, he's not healthy. He had this is the best I felt an ages kind of spiel beginning before the 2019 season, and look how that season ended for him. So I just don't see it getting too much better. I know a lot of people are kind of high on Arrieta, and I hope it works out, but I just don't think it's that likely. If one of them's if you're going to get the max production out of any of them, I think your best shot would be Eflin, and that'll be an ERA in like the high threes. But I think if that's the ceiling, that's good enough for a number 3 on this team.
Now, I think the real number 3 of this team will appear sometime mid-May, and he will be utilized pretty uniquely because of baseball's ridiculous time service rules and the Philadelphia Phillies and what they have already come out and stated they want their innings limit to be. But Spencer Howard, I've had the luxury of watching him pitch several times across a couple different levels now at this point. He is legit. I tell anyone who's asked me, because I also saw Sixto Sanchez pitch a lot through across several different levels here for the Philadelphia Phillies farm system, which prospect excited me more. And while the stuff is eye-popping and explosive out of Sixto's hands, he's a smaller guy. When you look at a Spencer Howard and the way his body looks like a 200-plus inning a year workhorse guy that is going to have a career beyond like a 3 to 5 year window. Like, I feel confident in what he is going to be for his career beyond that window of time. To me, with managing this limit, it wouldn't shock me if they do something of the 6-man rotation, if they kind of roll with an opener here and there, if they don't let him go beyond 4 or 5 innings through a lot of that late May, early June, maybe even into July. And then you have that top 3 of Nola, Wheeler, and Howard. And I think that's good enough to beat a lot of teams, especially if the offense clicks. Mm-hmm. What is your kind of projection or hope out of the Spencer Howard thing? And do you think he does spend any time at all at the major league level this year?
Oh, yeah, I definitely think he'll be up at the majors at some point. I think it'll be a little later than May. I think more June or July. And they could use him as that, obviously he wouldn't be an acquisition, but that, mid-season bring up that can really benefit with the team in the second half, kind of get them through the stretch, a different arm, someone who obviously the league hasn't seen much of before. So I'm sure it's going to be very dynamic. And he seems like the real deal. Obviously, Phillies prospects in the past are notorious for not panning out, but there is a genuine amount of hope and hype surrounding Alec Bohm and Spencer Howard that I think this will finally be the year when the Phillies get to put their young talent on display, like you saw it with the Nationals with Juan Soto and the Braves with Acuna, and the Nationals. I already said the Nationals, and the Mets with Pete Alonso. And I think this is finally the Phillies' year to really show off their young guys and have them come up and they kind of, get to be the phenoms for that year. And it's an exciting feeling. Obviously, anything could change with a, pending Chris Bryant trade. But for now, I'm excited to see what those guys can really produce.
We'll roll into that Bryant topic in just a moment, but let's stick on a topic of pitchers and great ones, Hall of Fame ones. The Philadelphia Phillies have put out that they will now retire the number of the late, great Roy Halladay, who was, in my lifetime, the most dominant pitcher that I ever watched live. It was probably him or Pedro Martinez. I always said those were the two guys who in their prime were what a treat it was to go to the ballpark and watch great pitching like that. I will say it's like no one's going to be mad that they're retiring, a Hall of Famer, obviously tragically, passing, several years ago. No one's going to be mad that his number's being retired. But it does make you look at some of the rest of the organization and players who have played throughout the years. Do you believe that this is the right move for the organization to be retiring that number? And if it is, do you believe that sets a precedent for players who maybe don't play a ton of years, but make, a lot of impact in those couple of years within this city or any city to have a jersey retired? will we see the core of the 2008 team? There's 5 players there that you could argue were meant more to this organization over the long haul than what Roy Halladay did. What's your stance on him and his jersey being retired here in Philadelphia?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's like the Phillies' policy to retire numbers that of players that have gone to the Hall of Fame. Like I believe Mike Schmidt's number's retired, Steve Carlton. I believe that's their policy, so I assume that's why they're really doing it with Halladay, as well as the fact that obviously he passed away within the last couple of years in that tragic accident. In terms of the 2008 team, even if Chase Utley, Ryan Howard, Jimmy Rollins, those guys don't make it to the Hall of Fame, I believe wholeheartedly that those numbers will get retired eventually. I think it'll take a little longer. I think it'll be a couple more years just to kind of, keep that legacy going. Like, obviously, you had the, 10-year reunion of the World Series team not too long ago. Then last season with the 09 NLCS championship team. So you're kind of still riding that wave. I think down the line it'll be another way to kind of bring back to those memories by retiring their numbers and having a wonderful ceremony with Utley, Howard, and Rollins.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need to take a look at it, and I don't know that any of them are Hall of Famers. I think the closest would probably be Chase.
Utley, yeah.
But I don't know that any of them are legitimate Hall of Famers. That being said, we've seen some really questionable names be accepted into the Hall of Fame, so who the hell knows anymore? But for what they meant to this city in the drought that incurred, not just in baseball, but all across sports here in Philadelphia, and what they ended and what they gave to the city of Philadelphia, those are numbers that I believe should be retired. So it'll be interesting to see the exceptions that are made. They made the exception, in my opinion, with Roy Halladay, obviously, yes, being a member of the Hall of Fame. He wasn't a lifelong Philadelphia Philly. It wasn't like he spent the bulk of his career here. At the end of the day, he was a Toronto Blue Jay. So it's a unique circumstance. I think it's a good response, and it's a great honor, and it's a way to honor someone who was the most dominant pitcher of our lifetime in our decade.
Oh yeah.
For sure. But let's move into your topic of the Bryant trade before we get into a couple fun things here. Obviously, this has been talked about a lot, and there's a lot to factor in with this. There's the luxury tax that apparently the Philadelphia Phillies just have no interest in exceeding, which is
right.
Amazing to me how a big boy franchise doesn't want to do that. So there's the luxury tax to consider. There's the possibility of an NLDH and, coming in as early as next season. And that works out great for one of Alec Baum or Rhys Hoskins. Do you really want to get rid of a legitimate prospect in Alec Baum that could fill that role either at first base or in the DH? So how willing are you to move on from some of these pieces? And then it's, what's it going to cost? Now that he lost the grievance, which we all knew was going to happen. So he has an additional year of control. What is it going to cost? So one, do you want Chris Bryant in a Philadelphia Phillies uniform? And two, if you do, what's the limit for you in this trade? Like, who is untouchable for you?
I'm just going to go on record and say I do not think a Bryant deal will go down. But if there's any possible way the Phillies can pull one off without giving up Spencer Howard, then I'd say, yeah, go for it. I think if you're serious about contending this year, then you really could use one more impact bat, and then I think that lineup looks golden, more so than how it appeared on paper last year for sure. At what limit? I don't know. I believe he's a Scott Boras client, so he's going to hit free agency after 2021.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like a JT Realmuto situation where there's a very good chance the guy's going to stay here after his 10 years up, or when he hits free agency, I should say. So I don't know. Obviously, I think the most movable piece is Alec Baum. Scott Kingery would be a good second piece, I'm guessing. From what I've read, heard, seen on the media, the Cubs would want a pitching prospect. And I think if, Spencer Howard's name comes up, you can't do that. I think Spencer Howard needs to come up with the organization. He needs to really, cement himself as the next great Phillies pitcher to kind of come through this organization. So maybe Adonis Medina. I don't know how much value he really has at this point, but I know he was once highly regarded in the farm system. Maybe Adam Hazley, but even what's his value at this point? I don't even know what he really projects as anymore. Obviously, I know he was a former first rounder, but it doesn't seem like his development has really gone the way most anticipated. So I think Bohm, Kingery, maybe Medina, maybe Hazley. If those are the names involved, sure, let's get them. I think Bryant could really bode well in Philadelphia. I think he'd really like it here. Obviously, it's not everything anyone really makes it out to be, but there is the connection between him and Bryce Harper. I think it would be a great storyline to see them play together. But really, if it's not those names I just mentioned, I wouldn't go after it for Spencer Howard. There's really no one else I see as really movable. Some people have mentioned Gene Segura maybe being moved, but I think his value is pretty diminished after a kind of, dry, mediocre season. So, I don't know. I don't think it'll go down.
I also don't think that this trade will happen. If it happens, it'll be a midseason trade. I don't particularly think that it's going to happen right now. All the names that you mentioned are intriguing to some capacity. I am with you. I would not move Spencer Howard. I also wouldn't. I fall in love with prospects way too easy. I see a guy throw one pitch and I'm like, oh, he's going to be great. I don't know what it is about me. I think I'm just a baseball romantic. I sit here and see these 20, 21-year-old kids who, are just out there striving for one inning of MLB experience. And it fascinates me. The process fascinates me. So I also don't know, and this is again, especially with the potential and inevitable, it looks like DH coming to the National League. I'm not in a rush to move Alec Baum either. He is rough out there at third base defensively. But he's not going to be any better or worse out there defensively than what we've been throwing out there. So
yeah, that's
there's
true.
That too. And his bat projects to be just highly impactful. And from everything that I have seen when I have seen him live and the things that I've seen on tape, he is a legit offensive weapon out there. So I wouldn't be in a rush to trade him either. Everyone who knows me knows how much I absolutely love Scott Kingery. However, I believe the value of that contract and the dollars on that contract, the control years on that contract, make him a very valuable asset. And especially to an organization that values versatility as strongly as the Chicago Cubs do. Now, will that remain beyond the Madden years? I don't know. But I do know, and honestly, it's all across baseball. The versatility is so loved at this point. If you could center it around a Kingery move, and then maybe beef up a couple other prospects in there, okay. I think I would do it. At that point, I would do quantity over the quality and move, let Kingery be your MLB headliner. Let, you mentioned Adonis Medina, whom I think is an interesting piece. He's never going to be anything in Philadelphia, I don't believe, but maybe a different team can get something out of him. So that's always something interesting to shoot down for, is to sit here and kind of trade project. Ideally, when we have a bunch of us on the show at one point, we'll get into these heated debates and arguments about who would or would not be placed in all of our trades. With just two of us on tonight, we're not going to go too deep into our trade machine here, where we sit here and really rip each other for our takes. But it will eventually be a staple of the pod where we sit here and get into arguments. Not on the pilot, though. Come back for more.
Looking forward to it.
So let's get into a couple fun things now. I mentioned that I am a co-host on TJ's One of Us pod, hosted by Scott and also co-hosted by Andrew, both members of this podcast as well. One thing that we spoke about going into the season was how electrically excited we were for the New Orleans Pelicans. They were, all three of us, it was our league pass team to watch. As fans of the game of basketball, beyond the 76ers, we just wanted to watch interesting teams. We had everything from the Trailblazers to the Kings to the New Orleans Pelicans. And that was the one that we kind of settled on, was this team is so young and so just overall inexperienced. They shouldn't be good yet, but I think they're just athletic and interesting enough to be better than what they projected to be, and they might just be one of those awesome stories to follow. Hasn't really happened. Missing Zion the first half of the season didn't help. But in every sport, there's always a New Orleans Pelicans. There's always a team that breaches some sort of interest from fans of the game. For you, Joe, Joseph, Joey, who is your New Orleans Pelicans of Major League Baseball this year? What's a team beyond the Philadelphia Phillies that you're excited to see and how they pan out?
This might kind of be a taboo answer, but I'm kind of very intrigued to see what's going to happen with the Washington Nationals coming off the World Series. I don't think they'll be as good as they were. I think really without Anthony Rendon, they wouldn't have won that World Series. I think he got a lot of big hits for them, especially in games 6 and 7. It'll be interesting just because I also don't think Max Scherzer is going to be the same Max Scherzer anymore. I think he's reaching a point in age where, he isn't getting any younger, and that arm is starting to collect a lot of innings. It's, starting to wear down a bit more and more. I think he missed a significant amount of time last season, and I just, you lost Rendon. I don't think Scherzer's really going to have it as much as he used to in the past, so I'm just kind of interested to see how that all works out down there.
I can't say that I'm not interested in honestly every team in our division. If you take a look at the baseball, the bet lines for futures picks for World Series odds, 4 of the 5 teams in our division are top 10 teams in terms of bet lines, which is incredible to me. So there's the possibility that we finish first if everything clicks. There's a possibility that we could finish 4th and out of the playoff picture. And that's just a testament to how good the NL East is. And for as many years as it was not, this is a really fun division in baseball. So I respect the answer there, the Nationals. For me, I am going to go with the Reds. I think they're a team that have just been very willing to make interesting moves, both after veteran presence guys, after, buy low on young guys.
Yeah.
They're nothing about the way that they're constructed makes a ton of sense to me, if I'm honest. Like, I don't know that they have a true identity down there or over there in Cincinnati, but I'm just interested. I'm interested to see what they can pull together there. Especially for a team that has been so willing, where our organization has been not very willing. So that'll be for me my team to kind of watch this year. So I'll be interested to see how that kind of plays out. It's going to pretty much wrap up all of our baseball talk for tonight. Again, this is a pilot episode. This is not the way that this show will typically go. We're going to have anywhere from 2 to 7 hosts on. If it's 7, we may just make it a YouTube show at that point on that night. We don't know. But it's going to be very, very different. So if you fall in love with this format, sorry, it may never be this way again. If you hated this format, it may never be this way again. We'll kind of feel this all out on PTBNL, the podcast to be named later. But let's end it on something non-baseball related. So anyone who knows me knows that I managed a movie theater for 12 or 13 years, somewhere in that range. And I'm a huge, huge movie guy. Tonight is the Oscars, and I have found out 3 minutes before that my co-host, Joey Joseph, is also a huge movie buff, and he and his lady, just as mine and my lady downstairs, we are all waiting to watch the Oscars tonight. So I'm going to ask you if you could give a recommendation to those who will obviously not hear this prior to the winnings of Best Picture. What movie for you takes it in that category? Best Picture of 2019.
For the record, I haven't seen this movie, but it seems to be the one generating the most hype.
Please tell me you're going to say Parasite.
It's either Parasite or 1917. I think it'll be 1917, but I would love to see an upset with Parasite. My favorite movie that I saw of this year's Best Picture nominees was actually Jojo Rabbit.
Okay.
Which was very funny. It satirizes Hitler's Nazi Germany towards the end of the Third Reich era, and it's got a lot of humor, got a lot of heart, and I really enjoyed it. But I think it'll be either 1917 or Parasite. What about you?
So the only one that I have not seen, last night I saw my last piece with the exception of this film. Last night I saw Ford v Ferrari, which was the last one I had to see besides the one that I believe is going to win, Parasite. I had no idea what Parasite was. It had been recommended to me through several different friend groups that I had, and I kept just not – it was just nothing I'd ever seen anywhere. Like I wasn't it was more of an artsy film, so had I not gone to like the Ambler Theater, I may not have seen it. But from everything that everyone says, I am more interested in a movie that I have yet to see than I am in ever revisiting any of the movies that I had watched this year from the Best Picture list, which again is 1917, Parasite, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which at this moment is my favorite movie from that group. The Joker,
it was awesome.
The Irishman, it's phenomenal. It was so good. Jojo Rabbit, also very good, like you mentioned. Marriage Story, which is on Netflix right now. Little Women, and Ford v Ferrari, I mentioned I saw last night, which was very good. But yeah, for me, I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to say I think Parasite takes it. Or partially agree with you. You said 1917 or Parasite. I'm just going to go straight up. I think it's going to be Parasite. But we are excited to sit here and see what some of those things work out to be for this year. But I got Rob from DOE coming in the studio now, which does mean that Disciples of Ed is about to kick off for its next show. It's been a bit. So Joey Joseph, for the first time on a podcast, how was it for you, man? Did we deflower you? Were we gentle? Was it good?
I enjoyed it. I look forward to doing it again. Thank you for having me, Shane.
Awesome, man. Well, listen, I had a ball having you on. I'm so glad baseball is back. And for everyone who enjoys our stuff, you can find everything that gets posted for right now still through the ANYP Twitter. So it's at ANY Podcast. You can also find it through each of our personals. Every time an episode is shot, it will be tagged through the hosts and co-hosts that are on it. So this one will be shot out through my Twitter, which is at Shane_Mead, as well as Joe's. Joe's, remind everyone again where we can find you.
You can find me at Broseph Biscuit on Twitter.
Awesome. So any one of the three that we just gave you will have this first inaugural episode of the podcast to be named later, PTBNL. We're going to stick it with the baseball thing. And we don't know if it's going to be called that or if we really are going to change the name every single week. We're not entirely certain yet. We'll figure it all out, but we'll see you guys in a couple days with another episode. I believe Andrew and other Joe will be on with a show. See you then.
Through Killarney, now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and so jiggle over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son, still happy life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.